Today I'm reading a book on Bhai Vir Singh. It's a collection of articles or write-ups by important people, and it is edited by Lt Col.J.S.Guleria. I particularly found one very interesting one, for him to be called the Tagore of Punjab. It's written by, this comparison has been written by Sabita and Gupta. So, shall we go? The Tagore of Punjab. The comparison between Tagore and Bhai Vir Singh may seem inappropriate, but in the limited sky of modern Punjabi literature, Bhai Vir Singh was the luminous sun, almost holding the same position of unchallenged supremacy which Tagore had in Bengali. Poet Harendranath Chattopadhyay once said that Bhai Vir Singh was the sixth river in the land of five rivers. His long life flowed like a stream of nourishing influence into the lives of his people and sustained them. Like Tagore, his inspiration has been drawn from the fountainheads of traditional thought and wisdom of India. He was rooted in eternal verities as Tagore was. He was born on December 5, 1872 in a Sikh family of note at Amritsar. Like Rabindranath, Vir Singh was brought up in surroundings which were religious and intellectual, and from boyhood onwards, the latter lived his life at a great moral and spiritual height. Thus, the poet in Vir Singh is inseparable from the saint in him. A true estimate of the contributions of Bhai Vir Singh to Punjabi literature must follow an appraisal of the condition of Punjab in the later part of the 19th century and earlier part of the 20th. That was a time when the eastern horizon of Punjab was aglow with a reddish hue preceding the rising of the sun of Renaissance. The sky and air were vibrating with the expectancy of a new life. Various social and political movements were started in the country, including Punjab, and naturally enough, the appeal and influence had the due impact on the Punjabi literature. But at that time, the mind of the educated Punjab was mainly possessed by the beauty of the Persian language on the one hand and Sanskrit language on the other. Urdu and Brij Bhasha were the media of literary expression. Punjabi was merely a spoken dialect, not considered urbane and polished, or the language of the learned and sophisticated. It had yet to assert itself with the dignity of a literary language. Men of letters had great hesitation in using this language for expressing their higher thoughts. When Bhai Vir Singh chose their spoken, neglected, rustically rugged language as a material for creating sublime literature, his well-wishers were alarmed and his friends frowned. But Bhai Sahib remained unwavering in his conviction that the poets and the literatures of Punjab should not neglect their mother tongue, Punjabi. They should not leave in a pitiable state the language used by the religious gurus and the ancient Punjabi poet devotees like Waris Shah and Sheikh Farid. They must discharge their duty towards their mother tongue. And that he did like no one else before had done. He gave the language of ballads and folklore the flow and force of a modern language. Towards the end of the 19th century, the famous Singh Sabha movement was gaining strength and popularity in Punjab. Bhai Vir Singh had made great contributions to this movement, which contained various social, educational and political activities. With his manifold talent, he had touched most successfully every aspect of the Sikh religion and society. He founded the Khalsa Tract Society in Amritsar in 1894. In 1898, he started publishing the Khalsa Samachar, still extant weekly in Punjabi. The chief Khalsa Diwan, the Khalsa College, the Central Sikh Orphanage, the Sikh Educational Committee, Harijan Movement, the Ashram for the Blind, and the charitable homeopathic hospital all bear witness to his noble initiative. In 1898, the first important work of Bhai Vir Singh, Sundari, appeared in print. It was an excellent historical romance in which he described with the utmost skill and sympathy the life of the Sikhs in the 18th century when the Mughals had let loose oppression on them. In a way, this novel was purposeful. In this novel of Bhai Vir Singh, the Punjabi reading people found and saw their lost image, like the Bengalis had seen their forgotten self in the works of Rishi Bankim Chandra. The valiant Sikh people accepted Bhai Vir Singh as a rishi and a creator. Soon to follow was the novel Vijay Singh in 2 parts and later Baba Naud Singh. In these novels, he evolved and established the technique of chaste Punjabi prose, which cast away its rustic garb and donned a new garment, rich and colourful. He was also a great poet, and his poetical works continued to appear alongside his novels and essays. The modern Punjabi poetry had been made tremendously rich. Throughout his life, he sang of the teachings of the saints and the gurus in elevating words and inspiring rhythm. To compose poems in blank verse in Punjabi language was one of his most remarkable literary feats. In 1905, he saw the publication of his work, Rana Surat Singh, a long poem of religious theme written in beautiful and flawless blank verse. Biographies of Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind appeared next. In between, Bhai Sahib published some collections of poems. In Punjabi poetry, he was the initiator of several other new forms and experiments like sonnets in the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam style, which express his philosophy. His poems are spiritual in effect. They don't stimulate intellect so much as the soul. His life was dedicated to God. The lofty eternal melody of Guru Granth Sahib echoed in his poems. His poetry is free from this is page 95, and then we have page 96. Yes, let me read. His poetry is free from all modern complexes and contradiction. He sings of an eternal blossoming both of life and nature. The sad but broad humility and potent self-effacement of the Vaishnava saint poets ring through these poems like the inner flow of the river Phalgu. So she's given some verses which I choose to, you must read the book to read. Okay, and then I just end in conclusion. Bhai Vir Singh's poems on the Kikar tree is a wonderful composition embodying a deep truth of life. It branches out to the sky in silent adoration of God, but the world returns to it a cruel offer of the axe. Bhai Vir Singh, when he sang of it, unconsciously sang of himself. The partition of Punjab was a blow to him. The silent, simple yet profound man of God passed away on June 10, 1957. Very well written by Sabita and Gupta. So with that, you must, if you get your hands on this book, must read it. Bhai Vir Singh.